In this help session, we will think a bit more about the analysis of the weekly BHP closing prices. As mentioned in the first help session, this task will be the focus of section 2 of your report. I just used the section heading of weekly prices in my discussion of the structure. You should think about an appropriate section heading. For the analysis of the weekly closing prices section, the idea is to still start with an introduction sentence, as this will set the scene. For example, maybe something to indicate that as one of the major companies listed on the ASX, that the price of a BHP share is of interest to many, including mum and dad investors, as well as self-funded retirees. Following this intro sentence, you are then ready to reference Figure 1. You would include your chart of this data, and then below it you can discuss the features, as well as then linking those features to real life. For example, you should think about how the price has changed over the period and whether there are any specific periods where the price reached a peak or a low, or rapidly changed, and any economic conditions that may help to explain the trends. The idea is not to give a running commentary of the whole period, but rather to select some examples of interesting features that help us to understand and explain the trends. Please keep in mind that the presentation of the data into a chart is therefore only the first part of this section. You have to be able to communicate the features as well as interpreting them in relation to real life. Presenting the data is not sufficient for this report. Analysis and interpretation must also be included. In terms of the chart in Excel, please keep in mind that this is time series data, and so the default chart type is a line chart. Remember that time goes on the horizontal axis and the variable of interest on the vertical axis, which in our case is price. Don't forget to present your chart appropriately, including a label for the vertical axis. In this case, we don't really need a separate label for the horizontal axis, since the date figures speak for themselves, but you should think about the formatting for the dates. And don't forget to add a title, either on the chart itself or using the figure feature within your Word document. You may want to consider whether it is useful to link the price trends of the BHP share price to the levels of the All Ords index as an indicator of market conditions. To do this, you should initially create a line chart with both series on the one chart. There will be, however, some issues in doing this, since the All Ords index has much larger values. When you first create this line chart, the BHP prices will look almost like a flat line at the bottom of the chart. To fix this, the idea is to use a secondary vertical axis for the All Ords so that it can have a different scale. Once you have the chart, the idea is to then think about how the two series are related. For example, do they move up and down at approximately the same time, or do they move opposite to each other? This allows you to potentially comment on BHP price changes with respect to market conditions. Okay, so a few things to try and to think about when working on this section.